Okay, today I'm going to talk about the properties of addition and multiplication. This is really important to know because I talked about in the past that we can manipulate math to make it look like whatever we want. And one of the reasons we can manipulate math is because of these properties. So people have spent a lot of their lives proving that these are true. So we know 100% of the time when something's a property, it's true all of the time. Okay, so so I'm going to go through some vocabulary words first, and then we'll go through the examples after I've gone through all the vocabulary words. Hopefully you have your graphic organizer available so you can be copying down in your graphic organizer these key vocabulary words. The first thing is equivalent expressions. The only thing you need to know about equivalent expressions is exactly what it means. It means it's two expressions that have the same value. So in the book it says 12 plus 7 is the same as 7 plus 12. But to be honest, it could be any expression that has the same answer. So for example, if I do 13 plus 6, that's going to have the same answer as 12 plus 7. They would both be equivalent expressions. Okay? So the first thing that we need to know is the commutative property. This is a big one. Okay? Commutative properties, this is the way I think about it, is commuting, communication. Any words that have commute or anything in it at the beginning is the same thing as the commutative property in math. So the way I think about it is if I go from my house to school, I take one route. Say for example, it takes me approximately 5 minutes. Let's say there's no traffic. When I go from school to home, it should take me the same amount of time. I go the same way. I get the same everything. So if I go from work to home, home to school, school to work, school to home, home to school, school to home, back and forth. So for example, it says changing the order of addends or factors does not change the sum or product. So there's definitely some vocabulary words. So for example, if I have 5 plus 8 equals 8 plus 5. If you see, I changed the order of 5 and 8 over the plus sign. That's the commutative property. Both answers I get 13, okay? I can substitute A plus B is going to be the same as B plus A. That's the commutative property, okay? 5 and 8 are known as addends. So addends. Like how factors are known with multiplication, addends are the numbers that are added together to get your sum, okay? So that's the the commutative property of addition. Now I can also have the commutative property of multiplication. 5 times 8 is equal to 8 times 5. So using the same idea and substituting, everywhere I see a 5 I put let's say an A, and everywhere I see an 8 I put a B. So A times B is going to be equal to B times A. In both answers I get the same product, or in both expressions I get the same product. 5 and 8 are known as factors. Those are the two numbers that when multiplied get us the product of 40 or whatever product you're looking for. So that is the commutative property, okay? And that's a huge one in algebra. The next one is the associative property. The way I think of the associative property is who do I associate with? Who do I want to be with? So I think about, oh, okay, if me, Miss Fritz, and Miss Martinsky are in a room, I can associate myself with Miss Fritz. I can tell her, oh, did you see what was on Dancing with the Stars last night? And then she can tell Miss Martinsky what I said, or I can tell Miss Martinsky first, and she could tell Miss Fritz. Either way, by the end, we all know the same answer, okay, or the same information. So this says changing the grouping of addends or factors does not change the sum or product, okay? So the example it gives is parentheses 7 plus 4 plus 2 is going to be equal to 7 plus 4 plus 2. And if you notice, I changed my parentheses from grouping the 7 and the 4 to now the 4 and the 2, okay? Do not get confused with just because you see parentheses means it's the associative property. That is 100% not true, okay? You have to change the grouping. If I change the order of the 4 and the 7, I would then have to use the commutative property. So make sure you are only changing the grouping and all the numbers are staying the same. So this, algebraically, would, whenever I see a 7, I'm going to put an A, bring down my operations, bring down my parentheses. Wherever I see a 4, I'm going to write a B. And wherever I see a 2, I'm going to write a C. So that is the associative property of addition. The associative property of multiplication is almost identical, but everywhere you see a plus sign, you're going to put a multiplication sign. So let's take a look and see what that looks like. Let's use the same numbers. 7 times 4 multiplied by 2 I'm going to multiply the 7 and the 4 first, and then I'm going to go 7 times 4 times 2. Let's just try this one to see if we get the same answer. So this is going to be 28 times 2. This is going to be 7 times 8. This is 56. This is 56. I know they're equivalent expressions. So if I would like to write those using my variables, meaning it's true 100% of the time for many different problems, I can say A times B times C is going to be equal to A times B times C. Okay? And that's the associative property. Let's look at example number 1. Okay, so if I look at example number 1, it wants me to simplify the expression using the different properties. So the first thing is, to simplify this, I need to get the 7 and the 12 together. So one way I can get the 7 and the 12 together is by moving my parentheses. When I move my parentheses, that's known as the associative property. So that's going to be the first thing I do. I move 7 plus 12 plus x with the parentheses and 12 plus x, and I move it to the 7 plus 12. Then I can add 7 plus 12 because they're like terms. So I'm going to add, and it's going to be 19 plus x. One thing we can write here is we can say that this is like terms. That's what I combine, like terms, okay? 7 and 12 are both like terms. They do not have a variable, they are just constants. Let's look at the next problem, okay? I need to get 6.1 and 8.4 together. I notice that 6.1 is not near 8.4. So if I were to just move it, okay, I would need to move it. If I would change parentheses, that wouldn't do everything. So I'm going to have to use more than one idea here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move that 6.1 over. So I'm flipping x and 6.1 due to the commutative property. Now I see that that 6.1 and the 8.4 are right next to each other. If I use the associative property, I can get those terms right next to each other. So now I'm going to move my parentheses for the associative property of addition. I can add 6.1 plus 8.4, and that's going to be x plus 14 plus 14.5. I can also write here like terms, due to like terms. Okay, let's look at the next one. The next one's multiplication. So in the first two we were looking at addition, now let's look at multiplication. So I want you to think about what two numbers need to be together. Hopefully you said the 5 and the 11. So 5 and 11 are right next to each other is very convenient. All I have to do is use the associative property and reassociate that parentheses so I can multiply 5 times 11. So I'm going to move it over, associative property of multiplication. I can now do 5 times 11, which is 55, and this is how I leave my answer. I leave my coefficient in front of my variable always, okay? Again, you could put like terms here, okay? At this time, I would like you to pause the video and do the on your own questions on the bottom of the page. Now let's talk about some more vocabulary. So the addition property of 0 is something you probably have known for a while, but may have not known an actual name for it. The addition property of 0 says anything plus 0 is going to be itself. So let's just substitute numbers. Since 0 has to be in it, it's going to be a plus 0 is always going to be a. Okay, that one's pretty self-explanatory. It's something you've always known, but never actually put a name to it. The next one is the multiplication property of 0. This is another one you all know when you learn your multiplication tables. It's saying the product of any number and 0 is always going to be 0. Okay? So if I have 9 times 0, I'm going to get 0. Therefore, a times 0 is always going to be 0. I'm never going to get a in return. This is kind of similar to the multiplication property of 1. If I have 7 times 1, I'm always going to get 7. So a times 1 will always be a. And these are true 100% of the time. Now let's look at example number 2. Example number 2 says simplify the expression 9 times 0 times p. Okay? So if you notice in this expression, there are no parentheses. Okay? So the first thing I would do is I know I need 9 times 0. So I'm going to use the associative property to make sure that those go together. So I'm going to put parentheses around there to show that that is true. Then I'm going to multiply 0 times p, and actually I don't really like how they put this on here, so I'm going to redo it. What I would like you to do is 9 times 0 times p. The first thing you should do is put it in parentheses. This is known as the associative property. Then what I would like you to do is 0 times p because of like terms. Because of the multiplication property of 0. Okay, I'm just doing that because I'm running out of room. But please write multiplication property of 0. Then 0 times p is also 0 because of the multiplication property of 0. Okay, so please write that in the full terms. Let's look at the next one. I know I need to get that 1 by the 4.5. So I'm going to use the commutative property. So I'm going to write 4.5 times 1 times r due to the commutative property. Then I want 4.5 times 1 in parentheses so I can multiply them. This is due to the associative property. Then 4.5 times 1 is 4.5 r due to the multiplication property of 1. And then you're done. Okay? And the reason you're done is because you can't simplify it anymore. There are no more like terms to combine. Let's go over the last example. Example number 3. Example number 3 says, you and 6 friends play on a basketball team. A sponsor paid $100 for the league fee, X dollars for each player's t-shirts, and $68.25 for trophies. Write an expression for the amount the sponsor paid. So the first thing we need to do is we need to write it exactly what it says. The sponsor paid $100 plus X for each t-shirt, okay, for each player's t-shirt, okay. I know I have you and 6 friends, so that's 7 people, 7x, plus $68.25 for the trophies. So the first thing we need to do is we know we need to combine our like terms. 100 and 68.25 are like terms, but they're right not next to each other. So we need to make sure we flip it so they will be next to each other. So I'm going to write 100 plus 68.25 plus 7x, and I can move this 68 because of the commutative property. Now 100 plus 168.25 is, I can combine those two terms because I'm going to put those in the associative property. So 168.25 plus 7x is the associated property. And then I cannot combine any more terms because x is not a like term with something without an x, okay? So my expression would be 168.25 plus 7x. I notice the book says it the opposite way. That's fine. They may have done it in a different way by moving that 100 and the 7x instead of the opposite way. Either way, you're good to go, okay? And actually, you may not even have to put this parentheses due to the associated property, because in here does not say that, all right? At this time, I would pause the video and do your sample problems. Hopefully this makes a little bit more sense to you. Feel free to ask questions, and if you have a nice day.